Bobby Fischer is undoubtedly one of the greatest chess players of all time, if not one of the best. And in this game, he definitely proves that, because he beat a grandmaster, Samuel Reshevsky, in only 10 moves. His opponent played on, didn't resign, but Fischer basically decimated his opponent in the first 10 moves. So Fischer with the white pieces starts out with e4, his signature opening move. Reshevsky responds with c5, the Sicilian defense. Fischer chooses knight f3, the open Sicilian, and then d4. The players trade on d4, and then Reshevsky plays g6, hoping to fianchetto this bishop on this nice diagonal and put pressure on this d4 knight. Fischer reinforces this d4 knight with bishop e3, knight f6, knight c3, bishop g7, normal developing moves, and Fischer plays bishop c4. Bishop c4 becomes a very important move in the game later on, because it keeps its eye on this f7 pawn. It's not so clear why yet, but it's just another normal developing move. No need to look into it so deeply. Castles, and what Reshevsky wanted here was f3 from Fischer. And f3 is a slightly logical move, but Reshevsky liked queen b6. This puts pressure on the knight and this pawn. So if Fischer were to choose a normal move like bishop b3, just safeguarding these three pawns, then Reshevsky could play knight e4. And knight e4 would unleash a discovered attack on this knight. And this knight is pinned because it would reveal the e3 bishop behind. And after, say, something like knight d5 or takes, simply bishop d4, knight d4, and Reshevsky is definitely better in this position. But Fischer, not falling for one of Reshevsky's traps in quotation marks, it's not really a trap because it's not like completely winning. Fischer sets up a trap of his own with bishop b3. Now, bishop b3 entices black to play knight a5, which would basically aim to trade black's knight for this powerful b3 bishop eyeing this f7 pawn, this large diagonal. And unfortunately for Reshevsky, he falls into it. It's not so clear why this is a bad move, because this bishop is basically has nowhere to move. If it moves here, it's going to get traded off. If it moves here, you lose. If it moves here, it's not really great on this diagonal. But Fischer plays e5. And e5 is a really nice move, because if you take this bishop, I will take your knight, attacking this bishop. Obviously, you can't take back, because I will take back the knight and remain a piece up. So black will take this rook, and then you take this bishop. And this rook is being hit, so if this rook moves, then this knight is trapped and can't get out. So you will eventually win this knight. And then you will remain 2 pieces up, 2 pieces for a rook, which is definitely better for white. So Reshevsky doesn't play that. But his knight has nowhere good to go. If he goes knight h5, g4 traps this knight. It's got nowhere to go. There's a common saying, a knight on the rim is dim. It's because it's got no moves to go. It's got no moves. It's got less moves to go. It's got less squares to go to, I should say. But, so the only really reasonable move, which is not a good move, is knight e8. Why is this a bad move? Well, knight e8 sets up a brilliant move for Fischer. Bishop f7. Now, there are a couple responses. You can go king h8, rook f7, or king f7. You're forced to do it because it's check. If you go, well, basically, all paths lead to Rome, because any move you do, the same thing will happen. For example, if you take with a rook, Tom computer move, knight e6. That is the main plan here. Knight e6. That's what knight e8 did. It disconnected this rook from protecting this queen. So now you can play knight e6. And this queen has nowhere to go to. This queen has 2 squares, empty squares to move, but both of them are protected. And this d pawn is pinned. You notice that it's pinned, so it can't take the knight. So that would be completely losing, and what happened in the game was king f7. If king h8, it's even worse now, because knight e6 comes with a laser beam, because if you take, I take you, and if you take here, I take here, and you take my bishop, I take here. So the problem with king h8 is obviously that you haven't recaptured my bishop. So what happened in the game was king f7. And this looks like it stops knight e6. because then just king takes. But after knight e6, anyway, you can't actually take this knight because it would be checkmate in 6 moves. Queen d5, king f5, g4 check, which is a nice little, I should say, deflection tactic or traction tactic, because it attracts the king further into white's territory, which is exactly what the white pieces want. Then there's a rook g1. If you go king h5, it's mate in 2. King h4 is the only move that holds on the longest. Then you have queen e4, bishop g5. You have a lot of moves, but queen e4 is nice. And black is forced to move his rook here, but if they don't do that and if they go here, then you take. And if they go king h3, it's the same mate. It's queen g4 checkmate. So, of course, Reshevsky, being a grandmaster, doesn't fall for that, and he's forced to take with the d-pawn. If you don't take, this queen has nowhere to move, and you're going to lose that. And then Fischer takes on d8, and the game is basically over. But because Reshevsky and Fischer had such a strong rivalry, Reshevsky didn't want to give up in the first 12 moves, so he continued to play on. And on move 42, Reshevsky resigned.